Alright, folks, it's the last week of 2022, so that can only mean one thing. An all-inclusive, thorough year in review. My top 50 coasters of 2022, my top 10 parks, and my top 25 bucket list coasters and parks. I have a feeling this one's going to be a long one, so let's just get right into it. Let's get the big chunk out of the way first. My top 50 coasters. Starting off the top 50, we have Kumba at Busch Gardens, Tampa Bay. I wouldn't say that this was anything to write home about, but it was much better than expected. Pretty intense, without a headache after my ride. At 49, we have Kraken at SeaWorld Orlando. This and Kumba are very similar, but I gave Kraken the edge because I'd heard worse things, so I was expecting worse, so it delivered higher than expected. 48 is Invader at Busch Gardens Williamsburg. This is a good family ride. GCI always has funky little layouts, and when I first rode, I was pleasantly surprised by the lack of headache. I rode this a second time after I'd gotten rides on some new wooden credits, and it was a little rattly in comparison, but not by any means headache-inducing. At number 47, Apollo's Chariot at Busch Gardens Williamsburg. I've given this so many chances. I rode 2 or 3 times in 2021, then twice in 2022, and my opinion remains the same. The first drop is pretty cool in the back, but this is the lowest of the 7 B&M hypers I've ridden, and I blame all that on the straight track. It was their prototype, I get it, but I'm glad they were able to learn from Apollo and eliminate the straight track in between airtime hills in future coasters. 46 is Fire Chaser Express at Dollywood. Is this a family coaster? Yes. Was it more wild and unique than I anticipated? Yes. Yeah, it kind of shook side to side on the forward sections, but the backwards is really where this ride shines. 1, the firework garage is a super creative way to reverse the train direction. 2, this is the only coaster I know, aside from like the launch coasters like the Premier Skyrockets or Escape from Krypton, Mr. Freeze when it was Reverse Blast, that backs into the station in a different direction than it left. And they can still run 3 trains. That was cool. Number 45, Goliath at Six Flags Over Georgia. Admittedly, I was a little surprised when I learned how much higher many enthusiasts rank this. Yes, I did enjoy the layout over the midway and the downwards helix, however, being on top of the midway, the drop was incredibly short as to not hit the guests. It didn't even feel like a hyper, and this had a significant rattle in the back and just, in my opinion, mediocre airtime all around. 44, SheiKra at Busch Gardens, Tampa Bay. Sorry, Valraven. SheiKra's 1 inversion beats your 3. If I remember correctly, this is the smoothest, yet the shortest in duration dive coaster I've ridden. I love the splashdown and the tunnel off the mid-course. It's by no means the most thrilling coaster in the park. I think I have it ranked 4th or 5th. But it's a nice coaster to help round out this park's collection. At 43 is Fahrenheit at Hershey Park. I got a ride on this in 2022 when I visited for Dark Nights. I think this ride solidified Fahrenheit's spot in my ranking, just about where it's been sitting. This is an incredibly unique coaster with some pretty great forces. The shoulder restraints aren't unbearable, but imagine the ride with just a lap bar. It's got a decent but bearable rattle, and my ride in 2022 was the first ride of the day on a cold, overcast, rainy day, and it was still intense as ever. Number 42 is Lightning Rod at Dollywood, one of my many unpopular opinions. I've given my full opinion in many other videos, so I won't spend too much time here, but basically, how can an RMC be that rough? I should not come off an RMC with a headache from a morning ride. That being said, I do appreciate the setting on the other side of the hill, and the bits of track that were replaced with iBox are rather enjoyable, especially the quad down. The view of the park coming back into view at the end of the ride, that's wonderful. Last downside for Lightning Rod, if it was smoother, I would wish it to be a little longer though. It is a pretty short ride. 41 is Intimidator at Carowinds. Admittedly, a lot of the placement of these coasters is dependent on not only how the ride delivered, but how it delivered compared to my expectations going into it. Lightning Rod was held on such a high pedestal from all angles, so much that the expectations versus reality made it my biggest loser of 2022. Intimidator was the exact opposite. Based on its nickname, I was expecting heavy trims, a crawling train, no airtime, and the like, but it just felt like a normal hyper. Number 40 is Great Bear at Hershey Park. I always enjoyed this ride, but it was never anything special to me. I thought it was unique, but short and rattly. However, I was able to get a post-rain ride in October, and it was surprisingly more smooth and forceful than I recalled. So I had to give it a bit of an edge. It was my number 23 at the start of the season, but I have since gained 83 credits, 25 of which ranked above Great Bear, but I definitely did move it above some other things that were previously ranked higher, like Dragon Challenge, Hulk, Dominator, Invader, Boulder Dash, Wooden Warrior, Fahrenheit, and Superman Ride of Steel. Speaking of, number 39 is Superman the Ride at Six Flags New England. This might be surprisingly low. I do genuinely enjoy this ride, but I was able to get another 2 rides on this in September, and the lap bars were much less comfortable than I remember. And I guess the ride must have been running a little slower than normal because it didn't feel nearly as forceful as I remember. So, while my most recent rides were not great, it's still wonderfully enjoyable. 38 is Diamondback at Kings Island. If you watched my biggest winners and losers of 2022 video, you know that I was expecting much more from Diamondback than I got. It's long and forceful and has wonderful floater airtime and a unique ending, but it had much more of a rattle than I was anticipating. It might have been the day, but it wasn't the ride or seat because I rode again further up the train later in the day and still came off feeling shaken up. I really hope I can get a better ride soon. 37 is Storm Runner at Hershey Park. Another one that I had the pleasure of getting another ride recently in October. I remembered this being fun but short, and my recent ride reinforced that. The launch was more forceful than I remembered, especially for the first ride of a rainy day. The following elements were also much more forceful than I remembered, but I do wish that ending wasn't so abrupt. It kind of kills the groove of the intensity. Number 36 is El Toro at Six Flags Great Adventure. This is probably another very unpopular opinion. I'll admit, I haven't ridden since probably June of 2021, but every ride I've gotten within the last couple of years, I started going to Great Adventure routinely again in 2018 and then started working there in 2020, every ride I'd gotten just hurt. Like I said, most wooden coasters will have that rattle, and this is just so massive and intense. For a Woody taken at that scale, the roughness is fine, relatively speaking, but your body doesn't differentiate between, oh, this is smooth for a Woody. Your brain just feels ouch. That being said, the Camelbacks and the First Drop and the Rolling Thunderhill are second to none. 35 is going to be Candemonium at Hershey Park. I believe I previously had this ranked above Nitro because while it is short, it's incredibly smooth and has better theming. However, I got a rain ride in October. It ran incredibly smooth in the rain, and those were probably the hardest trims I've ever felt on a hyper. It's still a great ride, while I do wish it was longer, but those trims really knocked this coaster down a couple of spots. Number 34 is Nitro at Six Flags Great Adventure. Same thing I just said for Candy. Yes, this does have a bit of a rattle, and the Mortal Kombat theme has made its way into my nightmares. But my most recent ride on Candy was so heavily trimmed that I don't think I can say any longer that Candy is better than Nitro. They're still very close, though. Number 33 will be Alpengeist at Busch Gardens Williamsburg. Yes, this gave me a headache, but I was sat in the back, so it's partly my fault. This thing is massive and has great interaction with the terrain. It's so forceful and such a unique layout for an invert. I wanted to get a middle or front row ride when I went back in October, but it was closed for the day. I'm not sure why. 32 is Griffin at Busch Gardens Williamsburg. I'll let you in on a little secret. While most of the coasters on this list were very close, numbers 32 through 39 were specifically incredibly close. All the dive coasters I've ridden have pros and cons, and while Griffin is not exempt from that, I feel like it has the best balance of pros to cons. It's got 2 inversions compared to SheiKra's 1, it's got good ops and is relatively smooth compared to Valraven, and it's got the fun splashdown ending as well. Number 31, Journey to Atlantis at SeaWorld Orlando. Honestly, once the novelty of this ride wears off, it'll probably drop significantly. But this performed so much better than expected that I have to give this ride the credit it deserves. The theming is just over the top amazing. I love this thing. We picked it over Icebreaker for a second ride. Number 30, Mystery Mine at Dollywood. This was probably my favorite ride at Dollywood. The theme was spooky and unique. The indoor dark sections took me by pleasant surprise. It does kind of jostle you around though, so I can't rank it too high. I bonked my head in the dark on my first ride and in another later section on my second ride, so it might have just been me. Number 29 is going to be Raven at Holiday World. Definitely the weakest of the 3 Woodies here in my opinion, but still a wonderful ride. It was super smooth, especially for a Woody, and had great terrain interaction, and that one ejector hill toward the end was a wonderful surprise. This thing is almost 30 years old and it still runs like brand new. 28 is Manta at SeaWorld Orlando. This is by far the best flying coaster I've ridden thus far. Stay tuned until I ride Fly at Fantasyland. It's incredibly smooth, unique, and visually pleasing, not to mention the queue and the music are so much fun. B&M flyers notoriously are not the most forceful, and as someone who loves airtime, while this may be the best of its kind I've ridden, there is virtually no airtime on this model of coaster. Number 27 will be Montu at Busch Gardens Tampa Bay. Currently, I think I'm going to put this as my second favorite invert. It's incredibly smooth and forceful, and has a unique layout. I cannot find much wrong with this coaster, if anything. As I've said before, inverts just historically aren't my favorite type of coaster. If there's any sort of flaw, I would have to say the clunky vest restraints as opposed to the newer ones. At number 26, we have Icebreaker at SeaWorld Orlando. Ironic because I picked Journey to Atlantis for a second ride, but Icebreaker is ranking higher. This is another one that I feel might drop a couple of places once I get more rides and the novelty wears off. Looking at it, reading about it, watching POVs of this ride, I was expecting a family coaster. Not exciting. But this thing packs way more of a punch than I expected, and I was flung out of my seat on multiple occasions. I got off of my one and only ride on this coaster incredibly impressed. 25 is going to be Cheetah Hunt at Busch Gardens Tampa Bay. This is arguably the most popular ride at the park, if we're just going by wait times. Yes, it is a family coaster, but like most of the family coasters that made this list, it's on the upper end of that spectrum. Aside from the long lines, which the ride itself can't really control, I mean, the ops were fine. My only complaint was I was expecting the low-to-the-ground S-bends at the end to be faster and whippier. But this thing is long, it's got some good forces. Yes, the over-the-shoulder restraints are hard and bulky, but they didn't hurt or interfere with the ride experience that much. Coming in at number 24 is Banshee at Kings Island. I think the thing that sets this apart from Montu, like I said before, is the restraints. Banshee has the newer, looser, more comfortable over-the-shoulder restraints, while Montu still has the old, bulky ones. While Montu didn't give me a lot of headbanging, I think even just the anticipation of possible headbanging from those restraints made me more tense and cautious. But otherwise, everything I said about Montu also goes for Banshee. It's long, tall, smooth, intense, unique. I was able to ride this twice in a row without the slightest headache, and while it was like the second and fourth rides the whole day, that's still a rarity for me, especially on inverts. Number 23 is going to be Mako at SeaWorld Orlando. This is going to be my highest ranked B&M hyper. When I wrote it, I thought to myself, I didn't feel that many crazy forces. But then I thought back to Nitro, which is my second highest B&M hyper, and I thought, I guess Nitro doesn't have anything super crazy either. Sometimes I think we forget that hypers are made for floater, not ejector. Mako does incredibly well with that, and if I'm being honest, I did get a quick pop of ejector going into mid-course. I only rode back row, but it was consistent every time. We rode 3 or 4 times throughout the day. A solid ride and arguably the best at SeaWorld Orlando. Number 22 is Lightning Run at Kentucky Kingdom. This was my second biggest win of 2022. I'll say the same thing I've said before. This thing is so unassuming, but it delivers such powerful airtime. The ops sucked, especially with only one train, but that was probably my only complaint. I enjoyed this ride so much more than I thought I was going to and wish I could have ridden more than once. 21. Phoenix at Knoebels. I went to Knoebels for a few hours in 2021 and was able to score 3 or 4 rides on Phoenix. It really doesn't look like much, but the airtime it pulls with just a buzz bar feels unsafe. The airtime was incredibly hyped up to the point where I don't think I got as much as I was expecting, but that being said, I think if I got much more, I would have actually flown out of the train. This was also my 100th credit. I feel a worthy fit. Starting off my top 20 is Twisted Cyclone at Six Flags Over Georgia. I think I have a love-hate relationship with this one. The ride itself is fine. RMC made the most of the space they had. But I wish it had a little more to it. It feels too short, incomplete almost. It also doesn't help that I wasn't a particularly big fan of the park it's in. That being said, I'm trying not to let my opinion on parks influence my opinions on the rides in them. This is my lowest ranking iBox and my third lowest ranked RMC above only Lightning Rod and Jersey Devil Coaster. But it's absolutely the unique new ride that Over Georgia needed. Coming in at number 19 is Storm Chaser at Kentucky Kingdom. This performed almost exactly as expected. The airtime hills in the beginning were incredibly forceful. The Trick Track double up was an odd feeling. I wouldn't say good or bad, just odd. But the ending helix fell kind of flat for me. I felt like this ride deserved a better ending. This was my first reride of my entire May trip. Granted, there were multiple reasons I hadn't had rerides before that, like headaches, long lines, or pressed for time, but that's still gotta count for something. I enjoyed this. I wish Kentucky Kingdom wasn't so obscure, or that it had more top-tier rides so that I could talk myself into another visit. Because I absolutely need to experience Lightning Run and Storm Chaser again, but at this point, I don't see myself making my way out there anytime soon. 18 is Wicked Cyclone at Six Flags New England. I got a recent ride on this in September, and it reaffirmed how much I love this ride. Incredibly smooth, whippy, forceful, filled with ejector. I'm almost upset that I didn't appreciate it for what it was all those years I'd visited in high school, as I only crossed over into enthusiast territory in 2020 or so. In all honesty, I think that the only thing keeping this ride from a higher ranking is the novelty or lack thereof. I've been riding this since it opened in 2014. Every single coaster I've ranked above it was a credit I gained either this year or last year. I'm sure if I took my top 17 and rode them as often as I've ridden Wicked Cyclone and the other coasters at New England Great Adventure, my opinions would change. But we're talking about my reality at the end of 2022, and this is what it is. At 17, we have Legend at Holiday World. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I don't do wooden coasters. They hurt my head too much. Under the impression that Voyage was the best ride at Holiday World, I assumed after getting off a slightly rattly ride on Voyage that Legend would be even more rattly. I'd also heard that it was running not so well from some friends who went last year as well. However, retrack. Butter smooth, and if there wasn't a 20-minute wait and I wasn't pressed for time, I would have ridden again and again and again. I should also mention that the spooky theming of Raven and Legend make me very happy. Do I wish that the theming continued throughout the ride? Yes and no. It would be cool if it did, but it could also easily be done very poorly and cheesily. I think this ride is just fine as it is, and a very close second best at Holiday World. Speaking of, number 16 is Voyage at Holiday World. While I was more pleasantly surprised by Legend, I do still have to give Voyage credit where credit is due. The lift hill is a massive structure, and then the rest of the ride just drops off into the woods into nowhere. Granted, all three Woodies at Hollywood World do that, but Voyage is just something different. It's long as hell, it's the second longest wooden coaster in the world, 8th longest coaster in the world, 4th longest coaster in the US, with well over a mile of track. Yes, it did get knocked a couple places because it was shakier than I expected. It was hyped up and it didn't live up to the admittedly unrealistic expectation. Sue me. But it was still smooth for a wooden coaster, it hauled its way through the woods, and I so desperately want to experience a night ride. Preferably trimless, but I'd even settle for trimmed. If they weren't running only one train and I wasn't pressed for time, again, I would absolutely have ridden this over and over. Just making my top 15 is Orion at Kings Island. This is another one that I wish was longer, but that packed more of a punch than I was expecting. Everybody slanders it because it's arguably not actually a giga, but I refuse to even be a part of that debate. Regardless of if it's actually a giga or not, I enjoyed it. My favorite part has got to be that speed hill after the turnaround, and the first drop is a close second. I got 2 rides on this, I believe, and I thoroughly enjoyed it both times. Next at number 14 is the only other B&M Giga I've ridden, Fury 325. I've talked about this in other videos, but this coaster was hyped up to be otherworldly, when in reality it was just a good coaster, to me at least. Everyone's entitled to their own opinions. I've talked about this in other videos, but this coaster was hyped up to be otherworldly, when in reality it was just a good coaster. To me at least, everyone's entitled to their own opinions. It's all about expectations. If I was expecting Nitro, I would have been blown away, but I was expecting, like I said, otherworldly, and I did not get that. So I can't put it as high as other enthusiasts simply for that reason. That being said, it's still an amazing ride and part of a great 1-2 punch for Carowinds. At 13, we have Sky Rush at Hershey Park. This ride is almost perfect. It's got the speed, the forces, the ejector. My one complaint is the restraints. When I rode back in 2020, I didn't have a problem with them. But when I got off my one ride in 2022, I was surprised my femurs hadn't snapped. It wasn't unbearable, but it wasn't the most pleasant. That being said, this ride, aside from the restraints, is just my speed. We all say that it's a ride built for enthusiasts that's too intense for GP, and I nearly fully agree. If I could get a comfortable seating position on that ride every time, I would marathon it over and over and over again. In the least morbid way possible, I love the feeling of a ride trying to throw you from its trains. And when Skyrush dives down to bend around the lake, I feel like a complete ragdoll, torso hanging 90 degrees out of the train. I absolutely love this ride. Number 12 is Intimidator 305 at King's Dominion. Probably another unpopular opinion, but I love this ride. This is another one that's probably too intense for your average GP, but I was able to marathon this twice before I needed water, which I was honestly impressed by. And I realize riding twice in a row does not qualify for the definition of marathon, but look, I get headaches super easily, so for me, twice in a row without even getting back in line is a marathon. While this ride doesn't do much, especially in terms of airtime, which I prefer over anything, it does well with what it does. It's crazy intense, and I consistently gray out after the first drop. I've grayed out on other coasters, but never as consistently as this. Every time, without question. Yes, the trims after the second helix suck, but like I've said before, I understand why they're there, and the ride picks right back up afterward. I think my one complaint about the ride this year is that the last S-bend whipped my neck against the restraints both times I rode, something I don't remember from 2021. So I did have to knock it down a peg or two for that, but not too far because this is still such an enjoyable ride. Just missing the top 10. Number 11 is Verbolten at Busch Gardens Williamsburg. I know this ride has finally been knocked out of its place. I still absolutely adore this thing. That being said, it's not the most intense or well-rounded coaster I've ridden, but this will continue to be my guiltiest of pleasures. The indoor section is always more forceful than I'm expecting, and the drop track still gets me. This may have dropped in my rankings, but I still love it in my heart just the same. Starting off the top 10 is Pantheon at Busch Gardens Williamsburg. This was a very close race between this and Verbolten, but I ultimately had to give Pantheon the edge for the unexpected ejector and the amazing stall. Yes, the theming could be better and the ride could be longer. It's nowhere near perfect, but the things it does well, it does incredibly well. Amazing airtime on the launches, the top hat, and the stall is just so drawn out. Night rides on this are great, though after experiencing both, I think I prefer night rides with the lighting package, as opposed to without during Howl-O-Scream. Number 9 is going to be Hagrid's Magical Creatures Motorbike Adventure at Universal's Islands of Adventure. Wow, that was a mouthful. I did really enjoy and miss Dragon Challenge, but I think this is the only worthy replacement. It's so complex both as a rider and in operation terms. This ride does such a great job at optimizing theming without making it cheap or stupid. It's super long and on the intense end of the spectrum of family coasters. I thoroughly enjoyed every aspect of this ride, and if the lines weren't notoriously long, I would have ridden so many more times. I had the pleasure of trying the motorbike and the sidecar, and I must admit, motorbike is indeed the way to go. It's such a unique feeling, something I imagine you can only otherwise experience on Tron. At number 8, we have Copperhead Strike at Carowinds. Another pleasant surprise, wonderful ejector, and even better hang time. I've said it before, but I genuinely felt unsafe in the best way possible on that JoJo roll. I have nothing bad to say about this ride. I enjoyed it, and it's the second half of a wonderful 1-2 punch. Number 7 is Millennium Force at Cedar Point. This was another one that was hyped up to be, well, portless. But I thoroughly enjoyed this ride and its setting. While it doesn't have ejector airtime like Skyrush and the RMCs, it's got a few decent pops of floater. Long, forceful, fast. I loved this ride. Don't regret waiting a culminated 4 hours for it. And I can't wait to get on it again, though I will never wait 4 hours for it again. At number 6, we have Maverick at Cedar Point. This was also incredibly enjoyable, though I only got one ride on it that I had a headache during, like most of my rides at Cedar Point. It was much more forceful than I had anticipated, both positives and negatives. I was not expecting such whip over the first drop or the various pops of airtime scattered throughout. I think my only realistic complaint about this coaster is the trims after the second launch. But similar to I-305, I understand why they're there, and the ride picks right back up afterwards. Number 5 is Iron Gwazi at Busch Gardens Tampa Bay. Here's the thing with Iron Gwazi. It was wonderful. It was crazy intense. I mean, it made my top 2%. I got one ride, it was the first ride of the day, I rode back row, and it was still absolutely insane. Yes, the lap bar did pinch the seatbelt against my leg, but I can look past that. My biggest issue with Iron Gwazi is I wish it was longer. Sure, it packs in a whole bunch for the amount of real estate it has, but I wanted more. It was relentless and never let up, but from first drop to final brake run, it's only about a 45-second ride, whereas the two RMCs I rank above this have about 60 seconds and 80 seconds rides respectively. With Iron Gwazi also being one of 3 hyper-hybrids in the world, and being the tallest hyper-hybrid in the world, I expected a little more. Again, not to say that I didn't enjoy it by any means, but it's for these reasons that I can't rank it any higher than number 5. Hopefully, that'll change when I get to ride again. At number 4, we have Twisted Timbers at King's Dominion. This was my previous number 1 at the end of 2021. Honestly, if I had skipped over King's Dominion this year, Iron Gwazi probably would have beat Twisted Timbers. But luckily, I made the quick stop on my way home, and when I got off, I was reminded of why this used to be my number 1. It's those back-to-back airtime hills, man. You're out of your seat, and they just keep coming. I lucked out because there were practically no lines, and I'd already visited this park, so it's not like I had other credits I needed to get. So I rode this, I believe, 3 times in the span of roughly an hour. Again, impressive for me. And in all honesty, my top 5 could easily be rearranged to put any of these coasters at number 1. That's how close these all were. Number 3 is Velocicoaster at Islands of Adventure. I had a similar thought with this as Pantheon, in that it looked way too slow to pull any decent forces, especially on the top hat, but similar to Pantheon, I was wrong. I also came into this ride knowing well that it was argued by many to be the best in the world. The expectations were high, and I honestly wasn't expecting them to be met, especially considering my previous experiences on Fury 325, Voyage, and Diamondback. Sorry, but this thing delivered! I got a morning ride back row and an evac ride front row. They both pulled equally amazing forces, and I was surprised both times at how much you flew out of your seat on the Mosasaurus roll. That element is so well done, and I believe that that is the best element on the ride, followed closely behind by the top hat. And being evac was the icing on the cake. I always enjoyed evacing rides when I was working, not that I was ever hoping for a breakdown, but in that it's interesting and a deviation from a normal operational routine. I always had fun with them, so getting to experience it from a guest POV, even if it was from the breaks right before the station, was a wonderful experience. In second place is Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point. This ride had some high expectations to live up to, and it absolutely did. It's tall, long, fast, intense, and jam-packed with airtime. I literally have nothing bad to say about this coaster, except that I'm mad I was only able to ride once. And my number 1 coaster of 2022 is Mystic Timbers at Kings Island. This might come as a shock, putting it above Gwazi, Vengeance, and Velocicoaster, but it was my biggest winner for a reason. I don't do marathons, let alone woody marathons, yet I rode this thing 5 times in one day, 3 of them all back-to-back. I'm sure the novelty will wear off in the future, but I'm not talking about 2023 or 2024 here. I'm talking about 2022. And if you ask me what my favorite coaster that I've ridden as of 2022 is, I would confidently say Mystic Timbers. It's just so smooth, graceful, well-paced, and unpopular opinion, but I love the shed. Kings Island has many amazing coasters, and this just happens to be my favorite. Alright, the next list we're getting into is my top 10 parks. I have 31 parks counted on my credit list, 29 which I've ridden coasters in. Sorry, Epcot and Animal Kingdom. Technically, I visited 33 if you count the Fun Spot parks in Florida that I just did Sky Coaster and left. I visited 9 new parks this year, 11 if you count the Fun Spots. And I am counting SeaWorld Orlando as a new park because I went once when I was like 6 months old and unable to do, well, anything. My number 10 park is Carowinds. I feel like I've been slandering this park more than intended just because I wasn't as impressed with their flagship coaster as I expected to be, and the aeronautical landing construction did make it impossible to navigate, but I enjoyed this park. I would describe this as a larger park in the chain with the charm of a smaller park. Sure, there's not a lot of shops, but it still felt very homey. Aside from the credits I missed in Camp Snoopy, because admittedly I forgot it was there, I feel like in my, we'll say, day and a half at Carowinds, I was able to do everything I wanted to do. Will I be going out of my way to visit again anytime soon? Probably not. But would I like to go again? Absolutely. Number 9 is SeaWorld Orlando. This is one of those parks where there's nothing to do and so much to do at the same time, and I think that just comes from their lack of flat rides. I feel like I got a good amount done in the one day that I had, and the things I missed I feel could have been hit if there wasn't a storm that came. I wanted to get another ride on Icebreaker, a first ride on Infinity Falls, and I would have liked to spend a little more time on the animal shows and encounters. But this park is so charming, their soundtrack is absolutely amazing, and they've got a good collection of coasters to boast as well. Between Pipeline opening and my love for all things spooky, aka Hollow Scream, I have every intention of visiting this park again sometime in the next few years. Number 8 is Universal's Islands of Adventure. I kind of bounced around with the placement for this one. I've been 3 times, once at age 12, 17, and now 22. I realize 3 times in the grand scheme of things is not a lot, but compared to the 1, maybe 2 times that I've visited most of the other parks on this list, Islands is my second most visited park in my top 10. This is a Universal park, so of course the theming is so beyond extravagant, and there's a lot to do. That being said, they only have 3 big coasters, and in my opinion, you can easily do the park in one day. I rode Velocicoaster twice, Hagrid's 3 times, and was still able to relax behind Toon Lagoon, shelter under Mythos, and explore Camp Jurassic, all of which were new experiences for me this year. So while I think that Islands does have a lot to do, I feel like I've done most of it, at least that I want to do. However, I realized when placing this in my rankings that that's not to say I wouldn't like to do those things again. Sure, this park may not be super high on my revisit list, but this isn't that. This is my favorites list, and I do really enjoy Islands. At 7, we have Holiday World. While I only had a little more than 2 hours at this park, I really enjoyed what I was able to experience. All of their thrill coasters are wonderful, and I love the themed areas. Christmas and Halloween are obviously my favorite, but 4th of July was done really well, and even Thanksgiving, which is an incredibly hard theme. I've also heard so many good things about Splash and Safari, which I would love to experience. One of my favorite things about Holiday World was the free parking, soft drinks, and sunscreen. These are all things that people might not think about, but add up quickly, so not having to worry about any of them was a blessing. The parking probably saved my bank the most, but if I had to pay for drinks and was unable to bring water in, granted I didn't look into it given the circumstances, so you very well might be able to, I probably would have sacrificed a headache for saving time and money buying drinks. Overall, a wonderful park that I thoroughly enjoyed. 6th place is King's Dominion. I think this park is up there towards the top of the Cedar Fair chain. They've got one of the best 1-2 punches, a strong supporting cast, loads of flat rides, family and kiddie rides, an observation tower, plenty of shopping and dining variety, and some fun theming, albeit theming isn't their primary focus, but that's okay. I've enjoyed this park both times I've gone. One was for a full day to collect all the credits, and one was only for 2 hours to stretch my legs on the way home. But both were wonderful visits, and I would love to go more often. Starting off the top 5 is Busch Gardens Williamsburg. This did get knocked down a couple pegs because my experience in August of this year had some rough patches, and, well, simply because I visited some new parks that I enjoyed more. But this will always remain relatively high on my list for a couple of reasons. Excellent thrill rides, Pantheon, Verbolten, though it's technically a family coaster, Alpengeist, and Griffin all crack my top 35, and their other coasters, Apollo, Invader, even Loch Ness Monster, are a great supporting cast. The thing that I think most made me fall in love with this park, however, is the theming. Not only is it themed to Europe, which is one of my top bucket list travel locations, but it is themed incredibly well. The first time I visited, I was taken aback with awe around every corner. I also happened to make it down for Hollow Scream this year, and while I did think that the Midway haunts were a little lacking, holy cow, the shows were worth the price of admission alone. They really outdid themselves with that lineup. Number 4 is Hershey Park. This and Islands are unique to my top 10 list because I experienced them first as a child, then as a teen or young adult. I remember thoroughly enjoying this park when I was 8. I got a credit I didn't know would be rare at the time in Roller Soaker. Lightning Racer was my favorite ride there, and I rode it with my dad 3 or 4 times in one day. I rode my first inverting coaster in Super Duper Looper and tried to describe with my 8-year-old vocabulary what it felt like to be upside down. My dad rode Great Bear, but I had no interest in riding yet. Fahrenheit had just made its debut, and I remember thinking, OMG, that's so scary looking. Then the last 3 years, I came back with a grown-up and enthusiast lens on. I got to experience all the thrill rides, catch up on some smaller credits like Wild Mass and Laugh Track, and re-experience the rides I'd already been on and loved over 10 years prior. Well, all except Roller Soaker. Point is, I've been able to experience Hershey from 2 very different lenses, and I've enjoyed myself immensely both times. I made an effort to get out there in 2020 and 2021 because I was working at Great Adventure and, living in the area, so it was close. But I love the park so much that I just had to make it down this year from New England, too. Their debut Halloween event was pretty cool. As someone who has been a scare actor before, I could tell that there was room for improvement, but trying to put on a GP lens, and honestly, even still looking through my scare actor lens, I was incredibly impressed with what they pulled off for year 1. It was also only the second weekend when I visited, so that's a factor too. I've gone on an abnormally long rant about Hershey, but the one last thing I want to say is that their snack variety is so creative. The milkshakes and the candies and the ice cream, even the chocolate-infused foods at the Chocolatier. Let's just say it's the sweetest place on earth for a reason. At number 3 is Busch Gardens Tampa. Unlike the previous entry, I visited this park for the first time this past summer. 2 things got in the way of the perfect day that are not the park's fault. Boiling hot Florida summer and Florida summer thunderstorms. So my cut short day was drenched with sweat, but I like to think I made the most of it. This park is massive. 1.24 miles around the main loop, 1.7 miles if you take the path up to Kumba. It feels like there's so much, yet not enough to do, and I don't say that as a bad thing. I don't even know how to explain it. Iron Gwazi is definitely their standout coaster, and almost all of the other ones are amazing supporting coasters. Montu, Cheetah Hunt, Shikra, Kumba, Cobra's Curse, Scorpion. Tigris hurt more than I expected, though still not much overall, and Sand Serpent didn't do anything, and I wasn't able to catch a ride on Air Grover. But the other coasters, amazing. The animal exhibits are adorable, and I really wish I had gotten on the safari train before lightning struck, because that was one of the things I really wanted to do that I didn't get to, along with the ice show, which wasn't running the day I went, and a second ride on Iron Gwazi. I didn't have the best luck with food. I wasn't in the mood for a burger, so I settled on pizza, even though I didn't really want that either. But that's not to say it was bad, just not what I wanted. However, the biggest pleasant surprise of this trip probably came in the form of Cirque Electric, a show produced by the same man who produced Frost at Six Flags New England when I was cast as a dancer in it. It was really comforting and homey, oddly enough, to watch another one of his productions that I didn't even know existed. I really want to get back to Busch Gardens, Tampa, during the holidays to see the park from a few different angles. Number 2 is going to be Cedar Point. I think I have a love-hate relationship with this park. It's wonderful, and there's plenty to do, but between the size and the crowds it pulls, there's almost too much to do. When I ranked my parks, I tried to take into consideration if I could do most, if not all, of the park in one day, and if I could spend 3 or more days at the park and still have fun. Cedar Point, I think you need 2 days minimum, 3 or 4 if crowds and weather are not in your favor. This park missed my number 1 spot simply for the situational factors that made my one visit fun, but not perfect. My number 1 park of 2022 is Kings Island. Like most of the parks on this list, I've only visited once, and my one day there was beyond perfect. I got multiple rides on 4 of the 5 big coasters, the crowds were good, ops were amazing, and I found my biggest winner and number 1 coaster here with Mystic Timbers. I cannot wait to get back out to Kings Island to experience the park again and hopefully do some more in-depth exploring. Briefly, I want to go through my top 10 parks and coasters I want to revisit or re-ride. My only criteria for this list is parks I've only visited once or coasters I've only ridden once. So we won't be seeing Islands, Busch Gardens, Williamsburg, or Kings Dominion on this list, nor will we see Fury, Lightning Rod, or Storm Chaser. For parks, my numbers 10 through 7 are 3 of the 4 Disney World parks, specifically Epcot, then Hollywood Studios, then Magic Kingdom. Okay, so I guess I've technically been to all these more than once, but similar to SeaWorld, I was an infant save for one time. Animal Kingdom, I haven't been to since I was an infant, so it's on my list of gotta get out and visit. My main reason for wanting to get back to these parks is the amount of credits I'm missing out on. Since my last visit to each park, Guardians has opened at Epcot, Slinky Dog at Hollywood Studios, and Seven Dwarfs Mine Train at Magic Kingdom. I'm also still missing Expedition Everest and Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. Number 7 is Knoebels. I went once in 2021 and fell in love with Phoenix. I want to go back to not only get more rides on that, but also get on Flying Turns and Black Diamond. This park is adorable and so welcoming, and I could walk around here exploring for hours, not to mention it's free to enter. 6th is SeaWorld Orlando. I want to get back on all the major rides. I can't wait for Pipeline to open. I want to see more animals, and I would love to come for Halloween, Christmas, and various food festivals. They have a wonderful atmosphere at this park, a wonderful soundtrack, but the atmosphere is going to be a recurring theme for this list. 5th place is Carowinds. This one I would like to revisit to try and get the Nighthawk and Sky Tower credits, experience Scarowinds and Winterfest, get more rides on Copperhead, and hopefully give Fury another chance. I really want to like that ride more than I did. In 4th is Kings Island. Kind of odd since it's my top park, but I was able to do everything I wanted to do and get multiple re-rides on multiple rides. Yes, I would love to get back to this park for the atmosphere and to relive experiences, but since I've already done things multiple times, it's not my top priority. 3rd place is Busch Gardens Tampa. I want to get re-rides and explore more. My day was kind of rushed because 1, the park is huge, and 2, weather was on its way. I didn't re-ride any coaster, I didn't get to do the train, I didn't get to see all the animal exhibits and shows. I know there is so much more this park has to offer that I didn't get to experience in my one day there. I would love to go back for that, again, including Halloween, Christmas, and food festivals. My 2nd place park to revisit is Holiday World. I only had half a day here. I got 1 ride on each of the 4 coasters, did a little shopping, and left. I want re-rides on everything. I want to do Splash and Safari. I want to explore the lands and shows more. There was a diving show I passed and almost sat down for, but decided not to for the sake of time. And while it's probably a long shot, I would love to go to Hollywood Nights. And my top priority park to revisit is Cedar Point. I missed out on 4 credits, 5 if you count Dragster, and everything I did get on, I only got 1 ride on. I want to come back and get those credits and rerides, but I also want to explore Forbidden Frontier. I want to do the Ferris wheel and Skyway. I want to explore Frontier Town and really take in the park's history. There are obviously many parks I want to revisit, but Cedar Point is by far the highest on my list. Now let's briefly go through top 10 coasters to reride. Again, these are coasters I've only ridden once. 10th is Beast at Kings Island. I wasn't too impressed with this, but now that I have that first experience under my belt, I'd like to give it another chance and appreciate it more for what it is. I would also love to try and get a night ride. Knob, I'm looking at you. 9 is Montu at Busch Gardens Tampa. This was a wonderful invert and arguably the second best coaster in the park, and I feel like I owe it a second ride at the very least. Number 8 is Icebreaker at SeaWorld Orlando. This took me by pleasant surprise the first time I rode, and I want to get another ride now that I know what to expect. It was way more fun and forceful than I thought it would be. In 7th, we have Maverick at Cedar Point. This ride was incredibly fun and incredibly forceful, and I enjoyed it just as much as I thought it would. This was just a wonderful experience that I want to experience again. Not to mention, I had a headache when I got my one ride on it, so I can't wait to see how much I enjoy this coaster when I don't have a headache. 6 will be Millennium Force at Cedar Point. I went in expecting somewhat forceless based on its nickname and got fun and decent forces. One of my favorite rides in the park that I would like to experience again. Number 5 is Lightning Run at Kentucky Kingdom. I was taken aback by how unassuming and amazing this ride was. The only thing holding me back from a second ride were the slow ops. Kentucky Kingdom might not be high on my list to revisit as a park, but Lightning Run as a ride is absolutely worth it. And number 4, Legend at Holiday World. Another one that I was taken aback by. It was so smooth and forceful, I was basically in shock the whole ride. Good shock. And now that I know what to expect, I want to experience it again and again. In 3rd place is Voyage at Holiday World. I rode first ride of the day, back row, and it was a little rougher than I anticipated. After getting that initial ride, I want another one to form stronger opinions and appreciate it even more, preferably later in the day. I would love to get a night ride, and it would be the dream to ride trimless at Hollywood Nights. 2nd is Iron Gwazi at Busch Gardens Tampa. Similar to Voyage, I rode back row first ride of the day, and that was it. My first impression of Iron Gwazi was, wow, it was hauling, but I wish it was longer. I want to give this one another shot, especially later in the day, hopefully even a night ride to see if it can get any better than it already was. And my top priority coaster to reride is Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point. Similar to Maverick, I enjoyed this ride, but had a headache already when I rode. I felt like I couldn't appreciate it to its fullest potential because of that. It was amazing, yes, but I want to give it the chance and credit it deserves. Alright, for the last leg of this video, I'm going to share my top bucket list parks and coasters. I hit more than half of last year's bucket list items this year, so I expanded the list to international. But don't worry, I won't have more than a sentence or two to say about each of these because I've never been there, or ridden them, so. Let's start with parks. 25 is Djurs Summerland in Nintofte, Denmark. From what I've seen and heard, they've got some great themed areas, and Piraten seems pretty cool. 24 is Tokyo Disney Resort in Urayasu, Japan. This is my highest international Disney park. It just looks like the full package with everything to do. Number 23 is Nagashima Spaland in Kuwana, Japan. Hakuge and the world's longest roller coaster. Need I say more? At number 22, we have Liseberg in Gothenburg, Sweden. Balder, Luna, and theming. It also looks like they have a haunted house attraction, and we all know I love my spooky themes. Number 21 is SeaWorld San Antonio. I enjoyed SeaWorld Orlando, and I can only imagine how much I'd enjoy this one too. While none of them made my bucket list for coasters this year, Texas Stingray, Steel Eel, and Wavebreaker the Rescue Coaster all look like solid rides. Number 20, Glenwood Caverns in Glenwood Springs, Colorado. While they don't have Steel Vengeance or King Ka, it's the setting of the park on the cliff that makes this stand out in the crowd. Plus, I would really like to explore the cave system. 19 is Six Flags Over Texas in Arlington, Texas, the original Six Flags park. This seems to be in the upper echelon of Six Flags parks, though nowhere near the flagship park. Still, I would love to get on the original RMC. They've also got Mr. Freeze Not Reverse Blast, which is a bummer, but I guess that means I have to go to Over Texas and St. Louis both. Oh darn! They've also got Titan and La Vibora, which look unique, and Aquaman Power Wave opening up soon. In 18th place is Fuji-Q Highland in Fuji-Yoshida, Japan. Ejinika, Fujiyama, Takabisha. That's all. 17th is Disneyland Resort in Anaheim, California. Being a Disney World child, I don't think California will ever be able to beat Florida, but I could be wrong, and I am more than willing to be proven so. This is often argued to be the best Disney resort, and likely for a good reason. 16 is Universal Studios Hollywood. Same argument as Disney. Enough said. 15 is Heide Park in Soltau, Germany. Colossus, bobsled, wing coaster, dive coaster. Nice. Number 14 is Lagoon in Farmington, Utah. Cannibal is a bucket list coaster for sure. And Roller Coaster, Wicked, Colossus, and Jetstar 2 also look like they have fun, quirky personalities. At number 13, we have Plopsaland de Panne in De Panne, Belgium. Ride to Happiness. Need I say more? This also looks like one of the many European parks with amazing theming. In 12th place is Thorpe Park. A lot of the parks in the UK appear to have a really spooky theme. They've got a whole slew of rides and attractions that intrigue me. And when I was little, I saw a POV of Saw the Ride right around when I was just getting into horror, and let me tell you, it was the most beautiful POV younger me had ever seen. The dark themes here look wonderful. Next at number 11 is Canada's Wonderland in Vaughan, Canada. While this doesn't look to measure up quite to Cedar Point and Kings Island, this still appears to be an upper-tier Cedar Fair park. They've got some intriguing standout coasters, and in my opinion, what looks to be a solid cast of supporting and family coasters. I've heard people say you need 2 days at this park minimum, so I'm eager to see all that there is to do. Starting off the top 10 is Europa Park in Rust, Germany. This appears to be one of the better themed European parks with one of the better lineups too. When I think European coaster trip, Europa Park is one of the first things that come to mind. In 9th place is Energylandia in Zadar, Poland. This is another one that comes to mind when you think of European theme parks. It's above Europa Park in priority because, well, Zadra. But I have heard people say that after their handful of standout thrill coasters, there's a pretty big gap in between them and supported coasters. In 8th is Six Flags America in Gurnee, Illinois. This is my third most anticipated Six Flags park. It looks to be one of the better ones, and they've got rides like X-Flight, Raging Bull, Goliath, Max Force. I've been wanting to get out here for years. Number 7 is Walibi Holland in Biddenhausen, Belgium. Both Walibi parks look to have a great atmosphere. The Holland park, though, untamed. This looks like a wonderfully set, wonderfully paced RMC that puts this park high up on the map for me. 6th place is Alton Towers in Alton, UK. This is arguably the stronger park between this and Thorpe Park, and the dark theming looks no less present. Plus, they've got rides like Smiler, Nemesis, Wickerman, Oblivion, and some cool family coasters like Rita and 13, which give me major Verbolten vibes. They've also got the towers themselves and the dungeons, which look like such a cool attraction. Number 5 is my highest anticipated park in Europe, Phantasialand in Beruhl, Germany. This park seems to have it all. Heavily themed areas and hotels overlooking the park, great rides in Black Mamba, Terran, and Fly. I've heard nothing but good things about this park. In 4th, we have Silver Dollar City in Branson, Missouri. This has been towards the top of my list for a while now. Outlaw Run looks wonderful, though I wonder how it runs compared to Lightning Rod, both being topper tracks. Time Traveler and Powder Keg look like extremely unique experiences, and everything I've heard about this park's atmosphere is wonderful. I would love to visit in the summer as well as during Christmas. Number 3 is Six Flags Fiesta Texas in San Antonio, Texas. Iron Rattler, Wonder Woman, Dr. Diabolical, The Quarry Wall, like, come on, how could you not want to go? In 2nd is Six Flags Magic Mountain in Valencia, California. My most anticipated Six Flags park simply for the wild and huge collection of coasters they have. This park is often compared to Cedar Point, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I'm especially eager to ride Tatsu, West Coast Racers, Twisted Colossus, and X2. And my most anticipated park is Knott's Berry Farm in Buena Park, California. Sure, they don't have the number or quality of rides that Magic Mountain appears to have, but this is one park I want to visit more for the atmosphere on top of the rides. Don't get me wrong, Ghost Rider looks amazing, and Accelerator if it ever opens. But Knott's Scary and Knott's Merry look like some of, if not the best holiday events out there. And after watching some Shane and Ryan videos, I'm eager to try every single boysenberry treat they've got. And for the last list in this video, my top 25 bucket list coasters. These explanations will likely be even shorter because I feel like most of them speak for themselves. 25. Circuit Breaker at Cataland. The first new-gen Vekoma and first tilt coaster in the US, and hopefully my first. 24. Nemesis at Alton Towers. Creepy themed invert that rides through the trenches rather than creating tall elements. 23. Wildfire at Kolmarden. It's an RMC in the woods. Need I say more? 22. Dododompa at Fuji-Q Highland, the world's fastest acceleration, if it opens back up. 21. Steel Dragon 2000 at Nagashima Spaland, the world's longest roller coaster. 20. Saw the Ride at Thorpe Park, one of the only coasters I've seen themed after a horror franchise, and it actually looks like it's done well. 19. Formula Rossa at Ferrari World, the world's fastest roller coaster. 18. Terran at Fantasyland. I don't know, it just looks really unique and forceful and uses its terrain well. 17. Smiler at Alton Towers, the world's most inversions and a hella creepy theme that I can get behind. Number 16, Ghost Rider at Knott's Berry Farm. I've heard many good things about this woody, like smoothness, intensity, and forces. 15, Hakuge at Nagashima Spaland. Again, it's an RMC, what could you ask for? And just from POVs, the layout looks more appealing to me than Wildfire. 14, Tron Light Cycle Power Run at Disney's Magic Kingdom. This just looks visually pleasing and like such a fun and technologically advanced ride experience. 13, West Coast Racers at Six Flags Magic Mountain. I know a lot of people hate on this ride, but like, it looks cool, and I've never been on anything like it before, and you get 2 rides in 1 circuit. 12, Untamed at Wallaby Holland. Again, it's an RMC in the woods setting that just appears to have a more appealing layout to me than Hakuge. 11, Top Thrill Dragster at Cedar Point. I'll never get the original credit, unfortunately, but I'm excited to see what the park does with this coaster and how it rides compared to Ka, since everyone I know who's ridden both says Dragster's better. 10, Cannibal at Lagoon. That thing just looks monstrous, and it was built in-house, complete with Lagoon's very own inversion. Very unique and very cool. 9, Wildcat's Revenge at Hershey Park. We've been asking for RMC Wildcat for years, and Hershey is finally delivering. While no, it's not a hyper or the longest RMC out there, it still looks to be an amazing ride, and I love the train designs. 8, Time Traveler at Silver Dollar City. I believe this is the only mock extreme spinner in the US, and it looks like such a wild ride. I've heard nothing but good things, and the drop out of the station just looks so much fun. 7, Iron Rattler at Six Flags Fiesta Texas. RMC off the quarry wall. That's all. 6, Zadra at Energylandia. This thing is a beast, and again, I've heard nothing but good things. 5, X2 at Six Flags Magic Mountain. Sure, it might be a little rough, but this is such a unique coaster and something I've been told you need to experience to believe. 4, Twisted Colossus at Six Flags Magic Mountain. My highest anticipated RMC and highest anticipated ride in the US. This is likely due to the fact that, again, you get 2 rides in 1 circuit. Both sides look amazing. 3, Egenica at Fuji-Q Highland. I've been told that this is X2 but with all of its problems fixed. So if X2 is on this list, why shouldn't its new and improved version be on it too? 2, Ride to Happiness at Plopsaland de Pana. Same thing as the last entry. I've seen reaction videos, and this is argued to be 10 times better than Time Traveler, which is already high up on my list. I'm curious to get out of Belgium and see what Ride to Happiness is all about. And number 1 is Fly at Fantasyland. I've heard nothing but rave reviews. It's a new-gen Vekoma launched flying coaster. I've heard you get airtime on it. The theming in the ride and surrounding areas appears amazing. The ride itself looks long and eventful. Similar to Ride to Happiness, Coaster Studios reaction videos have hyped this ride up so much. And that's going to round out my 2022 year in review. In the coming years, I'll probably shorten the lists and or split this into multiple videos, but since this was my first year of coaster content, I wanted to set a nice baseline. Thank you guys for watching, have a happy new year and happy holidays, and I'll see you next time.